The late afternoon sun filtered through the paper screens of the Yamamoto dojo, casting long shadows across the polished wooden floor. The air was thick with the scent of incense and the lingering sweat of countless training sessions. Master Kenji Yamamoto, a lean man with calloused hands and piercing dark eyes, stood at the center of the training area, his black belt tied precisely around his waist. At 35 years old, Kenji had earned his reputation as one of Tokyo's most formidable karate practitioners. His students respected him, his peers acknowledged his skill, and his ego had grown accordingly. The dojo walls were lined with certificates, tournament trophies, and photographs of Kenji breaking boards and bricks with devastating precision. "Today, we have a new challenger," announced Sensei Tanaka, the elderly dojo owner who had been watching from the corner. His weathered face showed concern as he gestured toward the entrance. Through the sliding door stepped a man who immediately drew snickers from the younger students. Hiroshi Nakamura was easily twice the weight of most men in the room, his round belly straining against his white GI. His face was kind but determined, framed by thick glasses that reflected the afternoon light. At 42, he moved with the careful deliberation of someone carrying extra weight, but his eyes held a quiet confidence that went unnoticed by most. Kenji's lips curled into a condescending smile as he studied the newcomer. "You wish to test your skills against a black belt?" he asked, his voice carrying a mocking tone that made several students exchange glances. Hiroshi bowed respectfully, his movements precise despite his bulk. "I have been studying karate for many years, Master Yamamoto. I would be honored by the opportunity to learn from you." The response only fueled Kenji's arrogance. He had seen this before. Overweight men who watched too many martial arts films and believed they could fight like the heroes on screen. The reality, in his experience, was always disappointing. "Very well," Kenji said with theatrical generosity. "But I warn you, I will not hold back simply because of your condition." His eyes swept over Hiroshi's substantial frame with barely concealed disgust. The students formed a circle around the two men, some whispering excitedly about the mismatch they were about to witness. Kenji began his warm-up routine with exaggerated flourishes, executing high kicks and rapid punches that whistled through the air. Each movement was designed to intimidate, to showcase the gulf in ability between himself and his opponent. Hiroshi, meanwhile, performed a series of slow, methodical stretches. His breathing was controlled and steady, his movements economical. Where Kenji displayed flashy technique, Hiroshi demonstrated fundamental principles: balance, centeredness, and mental preparation. "Are you ready to begin, or do you need more time to prepare?" Kenji taunted, bouncing lightly on the balls of his feet. His black belt swayed with each movement, a symbol of authority and skill. "I am ready, Master," Hiroshi replied quietly, settling into a basic fighting stance that, while simple, showed proper form and understanding of distance. Kenji's confidence bordered on cockiness as he assumed his own stance, far more elaborate and aggressive. In his mind, this would be over quickly. A few precise strikes to demonstrate the difference between a true martial artist and a weekend hobbyist. The thought of losing to this overweight challenger never even crossed his mind. The dojo fell silent except for the soft sound of breathing and the distant hum of Tokyo traffic beyond the walls. Two men faced each other, but only one understood that true martial arts mastery had little to do with appearances and everything to do with spirit, technique, and years of dedicated practice. The formal bow between the two fighters marked the beginning of what everyone expected to be a brief demonstration. Kenji moved with the fluid grace of a seasoned warrior, his feet dancing across the wooden floor as he circled his opponent. His technique was textbook perfect, each step calculated, each movement a testament to years of rigorous training under some of Japan's most respected masters. Hiroshi remained planted in the center of the circle, turning slowly to keep his opponent in view. His stance was solid, rooted like an ancient oak tree, but Kenji interpreted this as sluggishness rather than strategy. The black belt's eyes gleamed with anticipation as he prepared to end this mismatch quickly. "Let me show you how a real martial artist moves," Kenji announced loudly enough for his students to hear. He launched into a series of lightning-fast combinations, a high roundhouse kick followed by a reverse punch, then a spinning back fist that cut through the air with practiced precision. But something unexpected happened. Each of Kenji's attacks met empty air. Hiroshi had moved just enough, shifted just slightly, turned just at the right moment to avoid contact. His movements were minimal, economical, and completely effective. Where Kenji expected to find flesh and bone, he found only space. The students murmured in confusion. Their master's techniques were flawless, his speed impressive, yet somehow the overweight challenger remained untouched. Hiroshi's face remained calm, almost meditative, as he continued his subtle evasions. Kenji's confidence began to waver as frustration crept in. He increased his pace, throwing more aggressive combinations. A knife-hand strike aimed at Hiroshi's neck whistled harmlessly past as the larger man tilted his head. A powerful front kick that should have driven into his substantial midsection instead pushed against air as Hiroshi stepped aside with surprising grace. "Stand still and fight like a man," Kenji barked, his breath beginning to come in shorter bursts. The extended offensive was taking its toll, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool evening air. Hiroshi spoke for the first time since the match began, his voice steady and respectful. "A wise teacher once told me that the strongest tree is not the one that never bends, but the one that bends without breaking." The philosophical response only angered Kenji further. He had not come here for lessons in wisdom, but to demonstrate his superiority. His attacks became more desperate, more wild. A spinning heel kick that should have connected with devastating force instead sent him stumbling as Hiroshi simply wasn't where he expected him to be. Sensei Tanaka watched from the sidelines with growing interest. As the dojo's founder and a man who had trained martial artists for over 40 years, he recognized something that the younger students missed. Hiroshi's movements weren't random or lucky. They demonstrated a deep understanding of timing, distance, and the fundamental principle that in martial arts, sometimes the greatest strength came from not fighting at all. The circle of students had grown quieter, their initial amusement replaced by confusion, and then a dawning respect for the overweight man who seemed to move like water around stone. Hiroshi never attacked, never showed aggression, yet somehow he controlled the pace and flow of the encounter. Kenji's breathing was now labored, his movements less crisp. The constant attacking without landing a single blow was exhausting him both physically and mentally. His black belt, once a symbol of mastery and control, now felt heavy around his waist as doubt began to creep into his thoughts. As the second round of engagement continued, it became clear that this was not the simple demonstration everyone had expected. Something deeper was unfolding on the dojo floor, a lesson about humility, patience, and the true nature of martial arts mastery. Kenji's frustration had reached a boiling point. Sweat dripped from his forehead onto the polished wooden floor, creating small, dark spots that reflected his growing desperation. His breathing had become ragged, his movements less controlled. The precise techniques that had earned him respect throughout Tokyo's martial arts community were beginning to deteriorate under the weight of his own ego and exhaustion. "Enough games," he shouted, his voice echoing through the traditional dojo. The paper screen seemed to vibrate with his anger. "If you will not fight properly, then I will force you to." Hiroshi continued his patient dance, his thick glasses catching the light as he moved with that same economical grace. His breathing remained steady, controlled through years of meditation and proper training. Where Kenji had lost his center, Hiroshi maintained his calm like a mountain lake undisturbed by wind. The students pressed closer to the circle, sensing that something significant was about to happen. Sensei Tanaka's weathered hands gripped his walking stick more tightly, his experienced eyes reading the subtle signs that the younger observers missed. The old master recognized the dangerous combination of pride and desperation building in his former student. Kenji gathered himself for what he intended to be the finishing sequence. His reputation, his standing in the dojo, everything he had built depended on ending this humiliation quickly and decisively. He assumed a deep stance, channeling every ounce of his skill and power into what would surely be an unstoppable attack. "This ends now," he declared, launching himself forward with a devastating combination that had won him tournament after tournament. A powerful lunge punch aimed directly at Hiroshi's center, followed immediately by a crushing elbow strike, then a knee thrust that should have doubled over any opponent. But in that moment of supreme confidence, Kenji made a critical error. His attack was so committed, so all-encompassing, that he left himself completely exposed. His balance shifted too far forward. His guard dropped, and his mind focused entirely on the impact he expected to deliver. Hiroshi had been waiting for exactly this moment. Throughout their encounter, he had been studying his opponent, learning his patterns, understanding his weaknesses. The larger man's movement was subtle but perfectly timed, a simple sidestep that used Kenji's own momentum against him, combined with the gentlest of pushes at just the right angle. The physics were inevitable. Kenji's forward momentum, multiplied by his off-balance position, sent him stumbling past his target. Hiroshi's measured response, not an attack, but a redirection, caught the black belt at the precise moment when he had no ability to recover. Dojo fell completely silent except for the sound of Kenji's body hitting the wooden floor with a resonating thud that seemed to shake the very foundations of his certainty. His black belt, so carefully tied that morning, came loose and lay beside him like a deflated symbol of his former arrogance. Hiroshi immediately moved to help his fallen opponent, extending a hand with genuine concern. "Are you injured, Master Yamamoto? Please, allow me to assist you." The student stared in stunned silence. Their invincible instructor, the man whose techniques they had tried so hard to emulate, lay on the floor looking up at the overweight challenger he had so thoroughly dismissed. The tournament certificates and trophies lining the walls seemed to mock the scene unfolding before them. Kenji's world had shifted in that single moment. The impact with the floor was nothing compared to the impact on his understanding of martial arts, of respect, and of his own limitations. As he looked up at Hiroshi's concerned face, he began to realize that true mastery might look very different from what he had always believed. The afternoon sun continued to filter through the paper screens, but everything else in the Yamamoto dojo had fundamentally changed. Kenji slowly accepted Hiroshi's outstretched hand, his pride wounded far more than his body. As he was helped to his feet, the weight of what had just occurred pressed down on him like a heavy blanket. The students remained frozen in their circle, unsure how to process what they had witnessed. Their master, the man they had looked up to as the embodiment of martial arts excellence, had been humbled by someone they had initially dismissed as a joke. "How?" Kenji whispered, his voice barely audible above the sound of traffic from the street outside. His black belt lay crumpled on the floor beside them, somehow seeming smaller and less significant than it had moments before. Hiroshi carefully adjusted his glasses and smoothed down his jai, which had barely been disturbed by the encounter. His breathing remained steady, and there was no trace of arrogance or triumph in his expression. Instead, his round face showed only compassion and understanding. "Master Yamamoto," he began respectfully, using the formal address despite what had just transpired. "You asked me where I learned to fight. The truth is, I have been studying martial arts for over 20 years. Not in the flashy tournaments or demonstration halls, but in a small dojo in Kyoto, under Master Fujiwara." The name meant nothing to the younger students, but Sensei Tanaka's eyes widened with recognition and respect. Master Fujiwara was legendary among the older generation of martial artists. A man who had trained in the most traditional methods, focusing not on competition or display, but on the deeper philosophical aspects of the warrior's path. "Master Fujiwara taught me that true martial arts is not about defeating others," Hiroshi continued, his voice gentle but carrying the weight of hard-earned wisdom. "It is about conquering oneself. He showed me that the most powerful technique is often no technique at all, and that the strongest fighter is sometimes the one who never needs to fight." Kenji's face flushed with a mixture of shame and dawning understanding. Everything he had built his reputation on, the flashy combinations, the aggressive displays, the need to prove his superiority, suddenly seemed hollow and misguided. "I spent my first 10 years of training exactly as you did today," Hiroshi admitted. "I was angry, frustrated, always trying to prove myself, but I was also carrying this extra weight, and traditional training methods were difficult for me. Instead of giving up, Master Fujiwara taught me to work with my body as it was, not as I wished it to be." The larger man gestured to his substantial frame without embarrassment. "I learned that my size could be an advantage if I understood balance and timing. I studied how to move efficiently, how to read opponents, how to use minimal force for maximum effect. But most importantly, I learned patience and humility." Sensei Tanaka stepped forward, his walking stick tapping against the wooden floor. The elderly master's weathered face showed a mixture of pride and sadness as he looked at his former student. "Kenji-san, when I was young like you, I made the same mistake. I believed that strength meant domination, that skill meant always winning. It took many years and many defeats to learn otherwise. The old man picked up Kenji's black belt from the floor and held it out to him. This belt represents a journey, not a destination. Today, your real training begins again. Kenji took the belt with trembling hands, seeing it now not as a symbol of his superiority, but as a reminder of how much he still had to learn. The weight of his arrogance was finally lifting, replaced by something far more valuable: genuine respect for the art he had thought he mastered. The students began to understand that they had witnessed something extraordinary, not just a physical defeat, but a profound lesson about the true nature of martial arts. Mastery. 3 months had passed since that transformative afternoon in the Yamamoto dojo. The late summer, heat had given way to the crisp coolness of autumn, and the maple trees visible through the paper screens displayed their brilliant reds and golds. But the most dramatic change was not in the season. It was in the atmosphere of the dojo itself. Kenji knelt in Caesar position at the front of the training area, but he was no longer alone. Beside him sat Hiroshi, who had become not just a regular student but an honored teacher in his own right. The two men, once separated by pride and prejudice, now shared a bond forged through mutual respect and understanding. "Today we will practice what Master Nakamura has taught us about patience and timing," Kenji announced to his students. His voice carried a new quality, humility mixed with genuine wisdom. The arrogance that had once defined his teaching style had been replaced by something far more valuable. The students, initially confused by their master's transformation, had gradually come to appreciate the deeper lessons now being offered. Where once they had focused solely on aggressive techniques and flashy combinations, they now learned about balance, centeredness, and the mental aspects of martial arts that truly mattered. Hiroshi rose gracefully, despite his size, and moved to the center of the training area. Over the past months, his presence had become as natural and respected as any traditional sensei. His thick glasses still caught the light, and his substantial frame still drew occasional glances from newcomers, but the students had learned to see past appearances to the profound knowledge underneath. "Remember," Hiroshi said, his gentle voice carrying easily through the quiet dojo, "the goal is not to defeat your partner, but to understand them. When we truly understand our opponent's intentions, we can respond with minimal effort and maximum effectiveness." Kenji watched his former opponent with genuine admiration. The man who had once been the target of his mockery had become his most valued teacher and friend. Through Hiroshi's patient guidance, Kenji had discovered aspects of martial arts that his years of tournament success had never revealed. Sensei Tanaka observed from his usual corner, his weathered face creased in a satisfied smile. At 83 years old, he had seen many students come and go, but rarely had he witnessed such a complete transformation. The dojo that had once been a showcase for ego and aggression had become a true place of learning and growth. As the evening training session concluded, the students bowed respectfully to both their instructors. The hierarchy that had once been based solely on belt rank and physical prowess now reflected a deeper understanding of what it meant to be a martial. Artist Kenji and Hiroshi walked together to the small tea area adjacent to the main training floor, a tradition they had established in recent weeks. As they prepared their tea with careful precision, Kenji reflected on the journey that had brought him to this moment. "I owe you an apology that goes beyond words," Kenji said quietly, his hands steady as he poured the hot water over the tea leaves. "I was so blinded by my own pride that I nearly missed the most important lesson of my life." Hiroshi smiled warmly, accepting his cup with the same gracious manner that had characterized all their interactions. "Master Fujiwara used to say that our greatest defeats often become our most valuable victories. You have honored both him and his teachings by your willingness to learn." Outside, the sounds of modern Tokyo continued, the hum of traffic, the distant sounds of construction, the everyday bustle of urban life in the 1970s. But inside the dojo, two men had found something timeless and profound: the understanding that true strength comes not from dominating others, but from mastering oneself. The black belt that had once been Kenji's symbol of superiority now represented something entirely different: a commitment to lifelong learning and the humility to accept wisdom from unexpected sources. As the autumn evening grew darker, the dojo remained illuminated by more than just the overhead lights. It glowed with the quiet satisfaction of a lesson learned and a friendship forged through mutual respect. The story that had begun with laughter and arrogance had transformed into something beautiful, a testament to the power of humility and the unexpected places where true wisdom could be found.